This is the Washington Times front page for Tuesday, January 31st, 2023. Thanks for joining us. I'm George Gerbo. A top aide to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says discussions are now in the works about another U.S. weapon system that may be sent to help out the war effort. Mike Glenn reports the MGM-140 Army tactical missile system could be next to be sent to Ukraine. A Ukrainian advisor told the country's Freedom Television network that those weapons are needed to counter Russian artillery, which has caused devastating damage in the 11-month-old war. The Biden administration insists that no weapon system is entirely off the table and said it's always looking at the entire range of capabilities of any piece of military hardware. Another country that may get involved with providing aid to Ukraine is South Korea, with NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg urging the U.S. ally to do so. Speaking at Seoul's Che Institute for Advanced Studies, Andrew Salmon reports the NATO chief thanks South Korea for its ongoing supply of non-lethal aid to Ukraine, but urged it to do more because of an urgent need for ammunition. South Korea remains cautious about Ukraine. Its non-lethal aid includes medical gear, body armor, and rations. Its trade policy doesn't allow it to arm warring countries, but nations including Germany, Norway, and Sweden have reversed similar policies. The United States can't legally default on its debt, but a failure by Congress to raise the cap on how much the federal government can borrow could spark a funding crisis for major programs. Harris Alec reports some Republican and Democratic lawmakers agree that the Constitution requires the federal government to honor its debt, which currently stands at more than $31.5 trillion. The requirement means that even if Congress refuses to raise the debt ceiling, incoming tax revenue will be used to pay the roughly $500 billion in annual interest owed to the nation's creditors. The government last week bumped up against the ceiling of $31.4 trillion set by Congress in 2021. The Treasury Department is using tactics to keep paying the bills, but its maneuvering room will run out later this year, likely in the summer. You can read all of these stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page. You can also find the entire lineup of Washington Times podcasts at WashingtonTimes.com/podcasts. Florida public schools have begun to implement a new law to weed out sexually explicit content and other inappropriate material from classrooms. Susan Friccio reports Florida schools are now beginning to implement a law signed by Governor Ron DeSantis that gives parents access to an inventory of books that are made available in public schools. Specially trained school officials must review every book to make sure none of the material is considered pornography or is deemed otherwise inappropriate under state laws. Opponents say the law is forcing public school teachers to drastically restrict access to reading. And finally, Mark Houck was found not guilty by a federal jury of charges stemming from an altercation outside a Planned Parenthood clinic in Philadelphia. Valerie Richardson reports the anti-abortion activist was charged in September with violating the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act in October 2021. Houck faced up to 11 years in prison and fines of up to $350,000 if he had been found guilty of shoving a Planned Parenthood volunteer twice outside of the clinic. Local authorities declined to pursue the case, and a judge tossed out a civil lawsuit on the matter. Find all today's front page stories at WashingtonTimes.com/front page or on the Washington Times app, and find us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Washington Times in any major podcast app. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Wash Times for breaking news, sports, commentary, and more. For the Washington Times, I'm George Gerbo.